G'day everybody, welcome to the show. Today I'm just building a couple of hammer forms so that I can make a couple of new ones of these. Now this is the back panel off my 1934 Ford Coupe Ute, and I want them to be very accurate. So I'm going to the trouble of making some steel hammer forms, and we'll get all that ground up and clamp it together, and I'll show you how it's done. For some of you it's going to be your first visit to my shop, so I'll just point out now, tea and coffee are just over there. If you feel like a mug, just grab one, make yourself a bit of a brew, get yourself settled in, because we've got quite a bit to cover today and I want everyone to be comfortable. So here's what we're working on today. This is the back of the 34 Ford Coupe Ute, and these are the two side pillars that we're going to be reproducing today, and this is the remnants of the tailgate I've got. The Coupe Ute appeared for the first time in 1934, and it was an amalgamation of the coupe body and the roadster utility body. They put the two together and made a Coupe Ute. Now, when we look at the bodies, these were outsourced. They were made by a company called Egan's, and they're a handmade car, so there's variances between each car. I've got the remnants of two cars, and they're both different. When we look at any of these measurements, they vary by up to 3/8 of an inch between the cars, and I'm talking the length of the quarter panels, I'm talking about where the bead line sits, and even where the wheel arch is. There's differences between them. And also, there was a degree of evolution while they were building these cars. So I've got here the rear corner from body number 626, and it's got a folded over piece on the bead line in here where the quarter panel would line up to it, and then this car is body number 817, and they've made it in a different design here. So there was an ongoing evolution throughout the life of it. Now these Ute bodies are built along the old Model A style of building cars, where the door panels are overlapping the adjacent panel. So when you put it together, we've got this step in the body where this panel is outside of the one beside it. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to streamline the body a bit and recess the tailgate into the back panels and make a smooth fit car. And I'm building a street rod, I'm not actually building an original restoration. The other thing, these corners, a lot of hot rodders refer to them as being quite ugly, and I'll just show you how they fit together. Now here's the original quarter panel that belongs to the back panel that we're recreating today. So it's body number 817. So this is the piece that came off this corner, and the body is made on a wooden skeleton. So they actually assembled all the wood. So there's wooden boards which form the lining of the back of the car and the strength for these quarter panels, and they're held together with metal gussets. There's a solid wooden post in the corner, and here's the remnants of one of those, and the boards that formed the sides were timber screwed into the edges of here, in the spot where the white ants have eaten. Now, I'm going to build an all steel replica, but I'm going to line it with wood. So my wood is just going to be purely decorative, it's not actually going to form the strength of the car. So we're going to make steel sections in there, we're going to put secret box sections inside there to hold it together, and we're going to make it all out of sheet metal. But what I really want is to keep this corner section alive and keep the original style that it was designed in originally. Now when we look at this fold around the corner here, and you can see the nails where it was nailed to the boards, there's one there that's loose. This edge was thrown with hand tools, so it's got quite a radiused corner in here, and it looks okay, but it doesn't look sharp and crisp. So with the hammer forms I'm making today, we not only will make this curve through here with it, we'll also make the curve through here, and we can actually hammer this up and we'll get a nice tight radius in that corner all the way down like it was a stamped out panel. And then when we build this piece and put it on here, and I'll weld the edges together, we'll get this nice tight corner which will just look really sweet. Really looking forward to seeing it come together. This piece I cut out earlier, and I'm happy with the shape. It matches the curve I want for the side of the car and for the back corner there, and it's a bit thicker piece of material because this is the one we're going to be hammering on, and this second piece doesn't have to be as accurate because all that's going to do is clamp on the top and stop our piece of metal from lifting this side of where we're bending it. So I've left it a little bit shorter, but I'm also going to take the piece out here where the bead line is, because we will actually run the bead line in our new piece of metal before we start folding the edge. So I'll just get these a little bit closer to the same shape and then we're ready to go. Most of it's pretty good, but I've got a bit of a low spot in the middle. So I'll just grind either side of that. I'll throw a couple of clamps on them as well. Now once again, the clamp plate for the top doesn't have to be super accurate, but we don't really want it bigger than the piece that we're trying to work around, otherwise we won't be able to get that nice tight corner that I'm after. And cut. So we've got our former and we've got our clamp plate now pretty well to the right dimensions. I've still got a little bit of work to do on both of them because like I said before, I'm going to actually split this one, but I've also got to get this angle right on the top. So when we get our basic piece of metal in the right shape and ready to go, I'll have the fold on the top, I'll have the bead line in place, and then we can just slide this in, set the distance top and bottom, and then we can clamp it all together and start working from there. Now, like I was saying before with these bodies, they're a little bit hit and miss. And out of the 4 quarter panels I've got, there's a variance of roughly 3/8 of an inch over the entire length at the bead line. The wheel arches also vary a little bit front and back on the car, and even the height of the panels varies a little bit. But to just highlight what I'm talking about, where they've rolled the wheel arch over, we've got an inch of metal folded up here, and at the least over here, we've got about 5/16 of an inch folded up over here. So they've cut the basic sheet of metal out and realised they've put the wheel arch in not quite the right spot. So they've made a bit of an adjustment as they've gone, and you get the discrepancy in the thickness of the metal. So I'm guessing that between the two, they're probably supposed to have 1/2 inch to 5/8 of an inch folded up around the edge. And that's actually a pretty good working distance to throw an edge up on. Every custom piece starts out as a pile of hieroglyphics with a lot of measurements and a lot of markings on them. What I have done is designed our panel with a little recess for the tailgate, and I'll just show you what I'm talking about. This is the panel that fits below the tailgate, and this is the recess that the tailgate's now going to fit into. Now originally when Ford made the part, this was a flat panel that came all the way up to just under the level of the floorboards. Now I've fine-tuned it a little bit. The floorboards are going to sit this side of this little step in here. There'll be this steel edge in here instead of having the ends of the boards visible, and we've got this little recess in here for the tailgate to close into. So our side panels also need to have a little folded in recess along here. Now earlier on when I was working out what I needed, I was working on 1/2 of an inch for a recess, and then I thought, if I'm going to put a seal on this to try and keep some of the dust out of the back, I might go with a little bit more. So I've just changed my mind and going with a 3/4 of an inch recess and a 3/8 deep recess. So the depth in's 3/8 and the width across here will be 3/4, and that'll give me plenty of room for a rubber seal to sit in there when the tailgate closes. So hopefully that's all good. Now I've pre-cut and pre-drilled all the materials for this project. No, I just always wanted to say that. It's like one of those home improvement shows where they build a garden bench or something like that and they say, yeah, we've pre-cut and pre-drilled all our pieces, now we're just going to put it together and go to our website for all the facts and figures. Yeah, well, this is Rob's Shed. We don't give you anything like that. You're just going to have to watch and pick up what you can along the way. So the plan now is to put the folded edge on the inside for the tailgate recess, and then we'll run the bead line on it, and then once we've got that in place we can fold the top, and then we will put this curved edge on it. And I'm going to make 2 at once, so that way it'll ensure I've got a left and a right. The only sad thing about cutting out 2 at once and going full bore on a custom piece is we might wind up with 2 pieces that don't fit. But I'm hoping it'll all work, so we'll get into it. My pencil's not sharp. So I will work from one edge only to do all my measurements. So the first one is 5/8 of an inch. and 1 3/4 inches. And flip him, and we've got one at 1 3/8 inches. Now I like to work in the same measurement that the car was built in originally. So naturally a 1934 Ford was made with imperial measurements. So every measurement I make on this car will be imperial as well. So hopefully all my sums are right, and we can fold this up and we'll get something close to what we're looking for. It always pays to check when you're folding stuff, particularly in a press brake, that you're not going to muck the sequence up. And it looks like for us today, we'll start with the first fold on this side, flip it over, do the second one, and flip it back, and it's all going to work. So this is a simple process. This is an old manually operated machine. It's got a little screw thread around the side for adjusting the press depth. So I've just backed it off a little bit just in case it's going to run too deep. And then we'll do a couple of bends and creep it up to 90 degrees, and then we'll be right for all the rest of them. Are you ready? I like to just check with the combination square that I've got the same amount of material on each end to make sure all the lines are absolutely parallel. So, yeah, we're a whisker over bent, but that's not too bad. Okay, that's pretty good. That's what we're after. So this is the edge that stands beside the tailgate, and the tailgate goes in here. And later on, we're going to put a bit of curve in it this way to match the back of the car. So we'll get the other one up to this stage, and then we'll move on to putting the bead line across the top. So at the moment, this could be a left or a right, depending on which way we hold it up. But once we put the bead line in it, we've got a left and a right, and we've got to work accordingly with those. Now the top of our original panel has got about a 9/16 fold on it, but it has a piece of flat bar for a cap along the top here that was 3/4 of an inch wide. And because I'm converting to a steel body with a wood insert, I'm going to take that out to 3/4 on the top, and then we'll have another steel liner to form the strength in this post, and then there'll be a wood veneer on the inside of that to bring it out. And we might be able to just see the edge of this piece of metal under the piece of flat bar on top, but I don't think it's going to be in our face or anyway offensive. So we'll go with that. But even if I fold it now at 3/4, if I don't like it later, it's only a matter of trimming that edge off, and then the flat bar at the top will hide it anyway. So we'll go with that. Going to have to take a segment out of the bar here to be able to fold on the edge. Now this is a set of tools I made to do the bead line on the quarter panel, the tailgate, and these back corners. I've just got to get it centred up in the machine. Now the Pullmax has got a reciprocating action, and it's just a matter of having the tooling to the shape you want in your sheet metal and then feeding it through and closing the gap up a little bit at a time. Now, most people look at these machines and think they're a hammer, but that's not really what they are. They're more like a press brake. So what we're trying to do is actually just bend the metal through rather than squash it into a new shape. The fold we've put along the top of the sheet will be the fence, and that will work on this edge here, and that'll keep us running in a straight line. So the bead line will be automatically parallel to the top of the panel, and that's why I spent a bit of time getting this edge and that edge square, because that keeps everything in line with how we want it on the car. Now, just caught me getting a little bit ahead of myself. I didn't make allowance for the bead to actually take a piece of metal away. So I've just trimmed a little piece out of here, and I've put a little split down there where the bead line's going to go. Now, I would like to be able to tell you that I've done some calculations and worked out that this is exactly how much material needed to be moved. So when the bead line happens, it'll close that back up to a nice little butt joint I can weld easily. But it is purely a guess. It's an absolute stab in the dark. So we'll see how we go. Just lifting this up half a turn at a time. I've got a fairly steady rate of feed. Trying at all times to stay in control and not let the piece of metal start flapping around. little bit of polishing is normal for it. I'm just trying to feel where we're going to start at the bottom on something. It looks like we can still go a little bit more. Deeper noise was the jaws starting to hammer and bottom out on here. So I can hear it in the head of the machine that we're closed up to the point where I want it. So that's given us a nice deliberate bead line. That's going to look good on the car. And I was pretty close. I've got between a 1/16 of an 1/8 of an inch overlap. That's pretty good. They look pretty good together. I can live with that. I've got our piece of metal through the Pullmax and I'm not super happy with it, so I will replace it, and we can just use this one for a bit of a test pattern and make sure we get all the dimensions right and just show you how to do it basically. But what's happening is the edge of the tooling is running this bit of a line in the metal here, and it's actually got a little bit of a tiny dent. And for a little short panel like this, not so much a problem because I can tap it back a bit, get it smooth and just run the sander over it and get rid of most of that. But I'm going to use the same tooling for the quarter panel, and that's over 6 foot long, so it's nearly 2 meters. And to have a line parallel to this one just underneath there all the way through, I would say that 12-18 months after it was painted, there'd be a bit of shrinkage in the paint material and you would be able to see that line through the paint. So we're going to change it. Now, what is causing the problem is the fact that we're running across these 2 points. So this point here is actually putting a little dent in the metal, and it's the old story, equal and opposite reaction to every action. As this one's coming down in the middle and pushing down on it, it's putting weight on these 2 points here. So with Pullmax tools, it's an old trick to actually put wings on something to make it a little bit wider and a bit more surface area. But I can't on this one because I want to work right up to a fold, and it's going to be the same on the quarter panel. So what I'll do is extend this piece out here past the upper die, and I'll put a curve in it to match the finished piece of metal, but then I'll run a little curl back the other way so that it'll have a nice soft radius, and with it sitting on there, it shouldn't put that straight line in it like that. So it'll probably, you'll be able to see it, it'll polish the metal up a bit, but we just want to get away from having that bit of a dent in it. The other problem I'm getting is I've got a little bit of a dish this way on the bead line. Now, if you're looking at the piece of metal and you imagine the Pullmax bringing this piece in and pulling the piece of metal in to fold it around there, that's accurate to a degree, but it's also going to stretch this piece in here a little bit. And it's the variation in the amount of stretch that we're giving it and the amount that it's pulling it in, which is actually causing it to dish this way in here. So it's not much, but when we do the next one, we'll pull it out on the Pullmax. But what will happen is, as I'm working it through the tooling, I will lift it as I'm pulling it out, and we'll use the tooling as a bit of a lever, and we'll work it. So as we're lifting it, it'll pull that back to being a straight line again rather than having that little dish in it. So that's just something we've got to watch, and we've also got to watch it when we're doing the quarter panels as well, because a dish on this little distance here is pretty easy to get rid of, but when you've got 2 meters of panel, we've got to watch that. So we'll sort that out. Now I've got to measure where I'm going to put the hammer form into it, and we've also got to be aware of the fact that we've got two outside measurements, and we're going to be working from the inside. So we've got the thickness of this edge here coming down and the thickness of this edge here. And because we've got a 1mm thick piece of material, so there's another 2mm that's going to grow outside the folds. So we've got to basically allow for that when we measure it up. So, get a measurement on this. And at the top. And that should be roughly where we want it. Now the easiest way to get an even 1/2 inch all the way down there is just to set the dividers at 1/2 inch and then scribe off the edge of our former all the way down. So now we'll just trim this excess off and we can start to fold it. Now I'll do a rough cut first to get rid of the bulk of the material, and then I'll come back and trim it to the edge. Because this is just going to form an overlapped edge, like a safe edge, it doesn't really matter if we're not that accurate. But I have got it accurate, but if you found when you cut it, it was a little bit wavy on this edge in this application, because it's just going to roll back underneath and we're going to weld to the rolled edge. It doesn't really matter if it wasn't exactly the same all the way along. For now, I'm going to leave the bead line alone, and we'll trim that later. Okay, that's given us our nice curved edge, which we're going to roll back around with the hammer former, and we're just about ready to go. Now we've got our hammer form set on here, and I've packed it up a little bit because the folded edge on the back of the panel would get bent otherwise. And I'm just going to put it in place and clamp the plate over the top of it, and we can start to shape it. But everything we do, we need to make it easy to assemble. So what I've done is I've set my combination square to 1/2 inch, and I can just measure in from the edge to 1/2 inch to know where the overlap's going to be. So there's the top plate I made, and we'll just get our 1/2 inch setting. And we've moved it all over the place. Now, every time I put a picture of these clamps on Facebook, on one of my posts, everyone says, where do you buy those clamps from? So if we get a close up on that, basically you can get them at any good trade tool supplier, and these are awesome. Now, these people don't pay me anything to say this. These are just the clamps I use, and I find them to be really good quality. I've never had any trouble with them. So, got that? Awesome. Make sure we're in the right spot still, and we are. Now these clamps will take a bit of a hiding, so you can swing on them, get them very tight. I'll put 4 on. What we'll do is swing them out the way when I want to hammer past that point. Well, that's us ready to go. Now I like to just knock the ends down a little bit first to stabilise it. So when we're working the centre section, we're not actually moving the panel on the former. So we'll just give that a few hits on each end first. And like with any shrinking and stretching sort of exercise, we're not aiming to get a full fold in any one point first time round, but we'll knock the end down a little bit and then we'll work the entire length of it and then come back a few times until we get it to fold down to a nice right angle. So that'll stabilise it, and now I'll start to work the length of it. Okay, that's got the bulk of it sorted out. And I'll just put the little former on the top here and we'll get the last little bit done. I'm just going to use this drift to knock this top one down because it's got a bit more curve in it and it's got a tendency to want to fold straight rather than follow the curve. Now with our hammer form, we're able to create this edge time and time again. Now for my case, I've got to make my two back corners for the body. I've got to make the two back quarter panels where they come up to the same point. And I'll also use this for making the framework for my tailgate. The effort it took to make it in the first place was well worthwhile because of so many times we're going to use it. And it's going to ensure that every one of these curves is exactly the same shape. I've still got a little bit of a wavy edge along here, but for this particular piece it doesn't matter because I'm going to roll it right over and form like a little lap join. But on our quarter panel, when we make that, it's got to come to a 90-degree angle, and we'll get it to this point and then finish it with the hammer and dolly to get this edge nice and straight. Now, a little bit of a grey area for me because the original body uses a strip of metal which runs down the inside edge of here, and then it was screwed from the back into the wooden frame. And what they did was they formed this edge over, screwed their piece of metal onto the car, and then slid the panel onto it, and that's what held it in place. So we're doing ours a little bit different in the fact that I'm going to weld the quarter panel to this piece, but I will put some frame structure in there to support this post. So it's going to have a pillar in here made out of steel, and that most likely will have a wooden liner in it to make it look like the original. But for now, I'm using a bit of 1.6, just in case I need the extra thickness in here when I'm building the frame. I'll probably bring it down tighter, but that can be changed at any point in time. So it's just a matter of putting a piece of metal up against the edge to form a dolly, and then rolling it over it. And the same thing, a little bit at a time. Now I'm going to hammer this down quite tight just to get a nice crisp edge on it. Now when I decide the thickness of my framework that goes inside, I can just dress this down if it needs to be a little bit smaller, or leave it the same if we're going to use the same thickness here. So we've got the little top corner to do, and we're there. This is our basic panel form now. We've got this edge rolled around here. This needs to be trimmed off in a nice straight line with the cutting disc because the outside bead's going to tuck in underneath the edge of that, and there'll be a little feature in that when it's done. But this edge is really quite nice. So we've got the same consistent curve, and all we've got left to do now is to put the curve in it the other way, which I'm going to do with the shrinker. Now, because I've got this double fold in here for my tailgate recess, it's a two-edged sword because all I can do is shrink this edge here, but it's going to want to pivot on this line in the middle, and it's going to stretch it out here, and it's going to create a high spot all the way through here. So I'm going to work it with the hammer and dolly as I go, but once again, the hammer form that I made is going to be the guide. I can also hammer back down onto that to get a nice edge here and shrink this piece down here that's going to lift up. So I'm just going to give us a steady shrink all the way along it, just a little bit at a time, and we'll get a bit of a curve in it, and then we can check it against the hammer former and we'll see how we're going. Some pieces will need a bit more shrinking, some will need a bit less, but we'll work our way through it and just see what we come up with. Okay, we need a whole lot more in the middle. A little bit more at the top end. So we need to start from about here and do the full length of it. You can start to see what I've been talking about. It's starting to lift this corner up and not bring this with it. So we're going to have to work this piece over our hammer form in a vise to get the curve back in there. But I might be able to just put it on the table and put a bit of weight on it and pull it around with my own strength. So we'll try that first. Okay, that's moving. Still got a bit of a flat spot in here. Be very careful with sharp edges on the metal. You can cut yourself quite easily playing silly games like this. Just using the table, I'm just pulling the sheet metal around and using my palm as a press brake basically. And that's curving it. So wherever it wants to rock from is where we need more curve in it. Okay, so I've got our inside piece getting close. So that's actually pretty good along there. We've got a few little ups and downs, but that's nothing to worry about at this stage. And in this edge in here is a little bit overbent, but I can bring that one back quite easily by just putting a bit of weight on it on here, and that'll stand that back up again. So I can check that. And now we've pulled the whole thing back. One extreme to the other. Okay. That's getting pretty good. I've got a bit more at the top to do. So put a shrink in it just about here. And we'll nearly have that. And then that top corner will have to be hammered. Okay, we're getting close. That's starting to look something like what? We've got a bit of a hollow in here. So I guess I'm going to have to work that with a hammer to pull that out. So if we look at it this way, we've created this little bit of a concave in there. We'll just have a go at, once again, fingers. Stretch the piece of metal in the centre. That's and most of it's out, but yeah, I'm going to have to hammer the edge a bit. So what we'll do is shift it all over into the vise and we'll give it a few hits with the hammer. Knock it down a bit. So at the moment I'm just using the hammer form as a dolly, and I'm working dolly off method because I've got the hammer form under this edge here and I'm correcting this line along here, and I can see where it gets out of step. So at the bottom here it's over bent on the inside edge. I'm just trying to correct that in all the spots where it's under bent, because I can easily just go back and put in the stretcher and lift this corner up here. And the same thing I've got there is a little bit of over bending in here. Because I've hammered it now, it's brought some of it back out again, so we're rocking in the middle. So it'll be back over to the shrinker and pull that edge a bit more. Let's see what we can do with the hammer. Now, I've really made life difficult for myself by wanting to flush the tailgate in. So if I'd done it like the original one was, where it was just overlapped on that edge there, it'd just be a matter of shrinking this edge and we'd have the panel perform perfectly. But me being me, I just wanted to flush the tailgate. Now it is doable, it just takes a little bit of time and a little bit of extra hammering to get it to sit around where we want it. Well, it's got pretty much most of it out. And that's got our top piece pretty much right as well. Right. So that's the basics of our panel in place. I need to trim this out and we can just try it on the car, but I think this is going to look pretty good. And so it's got me inspired to build a couple of really nice ones now. So I've got to modify the tooling to get rid of that, get rid of this little dish that I had in here. But once again, that's just the method of how I put it through the Pullmax. But if this measures up correctly for all our dimensions, we can use it for a template to make a really nice one. That should give us enough room to try it on the car. So here we are on the car. The curve matches the back panel nicely, so we're good like that, but unfortunately we can't get a good camera angle from the other way and the light's no good for us. But we've also lined up to where the body's going to come just outside this line through here. So the quarter panel will flow down, run under that and get welded to that bottom edge there, and then it'll also come back to here and weld into there. So that looks pretty good to me. The bead line runs straight across, so it'll line up with the other side. We're not going to have a panel that's sort of looking like this or looking like that. So from a template point of view, I'm pretty happy with that. I'm Rob Teal. Thanks for watching. You're already recording, you cheeky bugger. My pencil's not sharp. Got to have a sharp pencil to make good marking out. It's much easier to walk around the workshop than to actually work hard. Toing and froing burns up a bit a day.